I've worked with over 400 men. I'm a divorce coach and I help men recover from separation and divorce. And in that time, I have seen a lot of men go through so many difficult situations, but the hardest, consistently the most challenging situation I see men in is living with their soon-to-be ex-wife, sharing a home, cohabitating while they're separated. And I want to take a moment in this video. I'm going to give you tips. There's ways to get through this. I'm going to give you hope. I'm going to give you some stories of men who have handled this beautifully, who have actually healed and grown and had healthier relationships with their exes on the other side. But I want to start out by acknowledging that, you guys, this is hard. I have seen so many things at this point. I've seen men on their second and third divorce. I've seen men who've had losses of loved ones, a death of a parent, suicide of a sibling alongside divorce. But the situation that is the most challenging, the most difficult, the most complex to navigate while you're trying to handle all of the crazy, intense, and painful emotions of separation is having to live with this person that you're separated from while you're going through all of that emotional roller coaster. For the men that I work with, it's often even more difficult because they're not the ones who chose the divorce. Right? She came to them and said she wants a divorce, she wants to get separated. But for financial reasons, for the sake of the children, for all kinds of life circumstances, no one can move out just yet. So there might be a period of months, even up to a year, a little more than a year I've seen, where you're actually sharing a home with this person who's told you they don't want to be married to you anymore. And it's especially hard for men in that position because this news is often very shocking. You might have known that there were some problems, things weren't great, there were some issues, but you didn't realize it was this level, that she was done. And maybe you've asked to do couples counseling, you've tried to work on it, you've tried to change her mind, and she's just not having it, right? She's done, she's moving on. And the really challenging thing for men at this point is that if she's at that point where she just doesn't even want to try, she's done, she wants a divorce, that means that she's already grieved the marriage. She's already gone through that emotional roller coaster and has really started to let go and move forward, whereas you're just getting the news now. So here you are. You have to process the shock, the disbelief, the denial, the anger, the hurt, the fear, the anxieties about the future, all of it. And she's still there, right? She's still in the home. It still feels like you're married. Right? And so this can be incredibly challenging, but there is hope. And that is what this video is for. So before I give you these 5 tips, I want to share 2 stories with you of men who have been in your shoes, who have walked this path and have come out the other side, not only surviving it, but really healing through that experience of cohabitation. So there's one fellow named John who I worked with, and he had to live with his soon-to-be ex-wife for about a year. They were separated for a lot of that time. They actually got divorced while still living together. And it was because of the housing market they were in and a variety of reasons. They weren't able to purchase new places and move in until they had closed on the house. And so they shared a home. And initially, one of their adult daughters was living with them. She did move out. And I can tell you in the beginning, this was not pretty. Right? It was hard for both of them. There was a lot of arguing, a lot of fights. They're also trying to negotiate the divorce as they go through this. But John joined my Better Beyond Divorce program. He did this work with me. You don't have to do this work with me. There's a lot of ways to do it, and the tips in this video are going to help. But he really embraced the inner work. Instead of trying to control her or change her or fix the marriage, he said, okay, I need to figure out what my anger is about. I need to get in touch with my anxiety, my terror of being alone. And he addressed all of those emotions, all of those fears while he was still living with her. And the beautiful thing about John's experience was the outcome. For him, when it came time to finally move out and move into his own place, he was actually excited about it. He still had a little anxiety, but he had conquered his fear of being alone. He was actually looking forward to having a space that he could make his own, a place that was his, and he had learned to be alone with himself, so he wasn't afraid of that transition anymore. Because he did the work on his own anger and anxiety, he was also able to heal his relationships. His relationships with both of his daughters became much closer and deeper than they had ever been. And his relationship with his ex-wife, ironically, at the end of this, was better than it had been in the 5 years leading up to the divorce. They're not getting back together. There is no reconciliation. But at the end, they were able to walk away amicably. without all of the anger and vitriol that they were experiencing earlier on in the separation. And all of that happened while they were still living together because of how he chose to focus his own internal work and because he followed some of these tips I'm about to share with you. One other success story I want to give you, because you guys, this is so difficult. And if you're in the early stages of this, I know you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed and afraid. And it's like, it's horrible because, most of the men I see going through this, they don't want to be alone. That's incredibly painful and frightening. But when she's in the house, it's almost worse because they're walking on eggshells. Arguments come about of nowhere. It's stressful around the kids, right? It's like there's nowhere to go that's safe. It's not okay to be on your own, and you can't really be because you're sharing this home. And being with her in this home is not safe. So it's just overwhelming emotionally, and it takes a lot of men to the place that another of my clients was in, Tommy. When I met him, he was shaking, not all the time, but throughout the day, he'd just start shaking. He'd be at work and be like, what is going on? His nervous system was so distressed by the separation and by cohabitating with his soon-to-be ex, who was drinking a lot and was nasty and verbally abusive, living with their 2 teenage kids. His nervous system was just shot. It was so fried. He was in this fight or flight all of the time, and he couldn't get out of it. Like John, Tommy did this work while he was still living with his ex-wife. And I can still remember it. It was, just 18 months ago when I'm filming this video, but I can see it clear as day when Tommy came on this coaching call and he was like, Rachel, I'm okay. He's like, she did it. She got drunk last night. She started yelling at me, all of the same stuff. And he was like, nothing happened. I didn't get angry. I didn't get afraid. My heart rate didn't go up. My blood pressure didn't go up. He's like, I was fine. And it was such a beautiful moment because he got there. He was able to be okay, not just pretending he's okay, not shoving down his feelings, but he got to the point where she was no longer able to hurt him while he was still living in this incredibly painful and toxic environment. It's not only possible to survive cohabitation with a soon-to-be ex, you can actually heal during that process. All right, so here's how you do it. Here are 5 ways to make living with your soon-to-be ex easier during separation. The first 3 are all tied together, and they are going to all depend on this first one, so pay attention to this one. If you or she are in a fight or flight response, do not engage. If you are engaged, if you're having a conversation and one of you goes into fight or flight, you need to walk away from that conversation. I'm going to tell you why. When a human brain is in fight or flight, and fight or flight is something that happens autonomically. With work on ourselves, with practice, we can learn to intervene with our autonomic nervous system. We can learn to calm it and stay more grounded, even in tense situations, right? That's what Tommy did. He had learned to work with his nervous system to not get activated when his soon-to-be ex was yelling at him. But until you do an awful lot of groundwork, that's not possible. We can't just choose to come out of fight or flight. It's the body's innate survival response. So when you don't feel safe, when she's there yelling and screaming at you, your blood pressure raises, your heart rate increases. But there's also all of these changes that happen in the brain. One of the changes that happens is your focus narrows. You're no longer able to step out and see a broader perspective or see things from somebody else's point of view. You're only focused on the problem. This is why people get so stuck in that defensive behavior when they're in fight or flight, because they literally cannot see. And this is interesting because it affects both their actual physical vision and the way the brain thinks. You can't step back and look at the situation from the outside. And you also you lose your peripheral vision, literally. So I have some other videos that go into more detail on the changes that happen in the brain in fight or flight, but what it boils down to is that when you're in fight or flight, you cannot reason and you're not going to get to a good outcome in any kind of argument or discussion, because the person, whether it's you or her who's in fight or flight, is not going to be able to see the whole situation clearly. They're not going to be able to take in both sides, and they're not going to be able to make a calm, rational decision. So if you are trying to talk about scheduling the kids' activities, paying the bills, the divorce decree, mediation, anything that requires both of you to agree on something that's in your best interests or in the best interests of your children, and one of you is in fight or flight, you're not going to get there. And now, if this wasn't your soon-to-be ex, there might be some things that you could do to help bring them out of fight or flight. And there are some things you can do to bring yourself out of fight or flight, which we'll get to in a minute. But in this case, when you're cohabitating with your soon-to-be ex, you're just not a very safe person for them, and they're not a safe person for you. So you are not the ones who are going to be helping each other calm down. You can try, you can speak softly, calmly, you can use non-aggressive body language, you can repeat the things that they say. But frankly, helping somebody come out of fight or flight is a lot of work. And for you, at this stage of things, you're going to be likely really triggered by their fight or flight behavior as well, right? So it's going to be very difficult for either of you to help the other person regulate. So when you're cohabitating, what I recommend is disengage. If you notice that she's getting loud, if you notice that she's talking really fast, if you notice that you are, if you feel your blood pressure, your heart rate increasing, it's time to walk away. Come back to that discussion at another time when you are both calm. All right, so that's number one. If one of you goes into fight or flight, conversation is over. It's got to end. You need to walk away. Number two is actually going to help you avoid getting there. So if you have to live with this person, it's really important that you start to observe your own triggers and hers. What are the things that put you into fight or flight? What are the things that put her there? And you'll want to be really specific here. Start to pay attention. When do you start to feel your heart rate increasing? When do you get that knot in your stomach? When does the anger come up? Is it a word she uses? Is it a tone of voice? Is it a particular accusation or statement? Is it something that she does? Is it something that she doesn't do? And often, there's so many, right? You used to be married to this person, living in the same home, and now you're separated and living in this home. Almost everything they do and don't do is going to be triggering initially. But if you can start to pay attention and notice, okay, what is it that really pushes me into fight or flight? What is it that really pushes her into fight or flight? That can inform you, and you can start to make small adjustments to your routine to minimize those triggers. I will tell you guys, when you're healing from divorce, when you're healing through separation, we do a lot of work to unwire triggers, to heal your nervous system, to heal the underlying emotional reactions. But the reality is that if you're living with this person, you're going to be triggered. So we also need some triage. We need some coping happening. And one of the best ways to cope is to avoid those triggers, minimize them as much as possible. When you notice what sets her off, avoid doing it. That's going to be hard because trust me, sometimes you're going to want to push her buttons because she's pushing all of yours. And that is exactly why we need the third tip here, which is to set boundaries for yourself. So this one is interesting, as if you look through YouTube, as I'm sure you are right now, you're probably hearing a lot of advice. Like there's some great attorneys out there who say things like, you guys need to set ground rules for each other. And if you're going to cohabitate while you're separated, you need to set rules about the kids, about money, about meal times, how you're going to live. And I often hear my own clients getting really excited about this idea in the beginning. They're like, yeah, okay, that could work, right? Like we could have some structure, we could have some ground rules, kind of like having a roommate, right? Do we share meals? Do we not? Whose food is whose? Who has Monday night softball practice with the kids? Like whatever it is, like let's have a nice little calendar, a nice little chart. We'll have all these rules, and then we won't upset each other so much. I can tell you that this approach is disastrous for most people. Why is it so problematic? Because it requires both of you to agree on what the rules are and then both of you to follow them. And guess what? You can only control 50% of that equation, right? And the reality for most couples going through separation is that this is why you're going through a separation in the first place, because you didn't have clear communication, because you couldn't talk about these things. You couldn't reach a consensus about money, about the kids, about parenting, about schedules, about household chores, about grocery shopping, about all of it, right? If you could, you probably wouldn't be getting divorced right now. So what makes you think you're suddenly going to be on the same page for these ground rules now that you're living together as a separated couple instead of as a married couple? Like I said, I've seen a lot of men try this, and in a very few cases, they've been successful. Those cases were where there was an incredibly amicable situation where they actually had very good communication. And even in those instances, this approach of setting rules for one another tends to break down when one of you starts dating. Right? That brings up so many emotions in the other person, and then all of these rules and schedules and planning, it tends to go to hell. So what can you do? You can set real boundaries. Real boundaries are not for other people. They're not rules that you say, hey, you have to do this or else, because what is the or else? What can you do to that person? You can't force them to follow your rules, to follow your boundaries, but you can set boundaries for yourself. And boundaries for yourself are just a set of rules that you create for you about what you will and will not allow yourself to be exposed to throughout your day. The key to successfully setting boundaries is that 100% of the action falls on you, that you are completely in control of holding the boundary, regardless of what the other person does. So let me give you some examples. You could set a boundary that says, if she's in the kitchen, I'm staying out of the kitchen. Okay? Doesn't matter what she's doing. You're not entering that space when she's in it because it's not good for you. You could set a boundary for your conversations with her. If we're talking and she raises her voice or she starts to swear or she says something mean, I'm going to walk away. Right? If she goes into fight or flight, if she gets aggressive or violent, I remove myself from the situation. I am not going to be exposed to that. I'm going to go to the other room. I'm going to shut a door. You can set boundaries around legal discussions, right? Sometimes people are cohabitating and they're one of the spouses also keeps trying to bring up the legal negotiations. And you could set a boundary that's very specific where you say something like, look, it's really important to me to keep things civil between us in this house. And for that reason, I can't discuss any of this with you outside of mediation. And then if she keeps pushing, you walk away, right? You've set this boundary for you. Another great boundary to set for yourself is an action that you're going to take when you notice fight or flight happening in you. You are triggered. You're in fight or flight. Okay, when I notice that, as soon as I notice my breathing gets short or my stomach clenches up or I don't feel safe, I'm going to call a friend. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to go for a long walk. Right? Whatever it is that helps you self-regulate. Plan it in advance. Hold that as a boundary for yourself. Remember, boundaries are rules, but they're rules for you, not for her, because you cannot control her, but you can control you. Setting and holding specific boundaries like this is a wonderful way to take care of yourself during a very stressful circumstance, which is what cohabitation with a soon-to-be ex is. Basically, what you're doing is giving yourself permission to remove yourself from situations that aren't good for you and giving yourself permission to do things that are good for you. By planning these in advance, it will be so much easier to hold them. All right, so we've got 3 down already. If one of you is in fight or flight, don't engage or disengage. That means walk away. Don't continue trying to have a rational, logical conversation or trying to come to an agreement because it's not possible when one or both of your nervous systems is activated. Number 2, notice what triggers you, notice what triggers her, minimize those triggers. Number 3, set boundaries for yourself so that you can actually take care of yourself while you're sharing this home. Number 4 is to get outside support. Do not do this alone. Do not go through these next months, 6 months, year by yourself in this house with this woman and your children, right? Because you are going to hear such a biased story about who you are and what is happening from her. And if you spend all of your time locked just in that, a part of your brain is going to start to believe it. And I work with a lot of men who have internalized the things that their ex-wives say. And it can be incredibly damaging to your self-confidence and your self-esteem. And the reality is what she's saying is not the whole truth. And often it's not even a part of the truth because, again, she also is in an activated nervous system state and is not seeing everything clearly right now. So get out of the house, get some support. This can look like a lot of different things, you guys. What I see my clients doing that they have a lot of success with, obviously, is my Better Beyond Divorce program. But a lot of them also see a therapist or a counselor. They go to divorce care at a local church. They go to AA. They find a men's group. Some of them do all of these things. They reach out to friends and family. They have people that they can call and connect with. If they don't, they go to meetups. They find hobbies and activities, people and places that can support them outside of the house, away from their ex-wife, that can give them another perspective. And it's really important to have people around you. And if you don't have anyone in your life who can do this, a therapist or counselor or coach can do it. Someone who can reflect you back to yourself, who can reflect back a more honest, a more complete version of who you are than the reflection that your ex-wife is giving you right now, or your soon-to-be ex-wife. Because what she's telling you and showing you about who you are is not all of who you are. There is so much more to it. But if all you see is that reflection from her, it's going to be devastating. It takes a lot of men down a path of desperation, despair. It's where we see the suicide rates after divorce for men getting so high. So getting outside support, having other people in your life who can reflect you back to you and help you remember who you are outside of all of this is absolutely essential. Included in this maybe is its own other tip. But guys, do the work. Do the inner work on yourself. Learn to be with your emotions. If you don't have any idea what that means, I have a great masterclass that talks about it. Learn how to deal with your anger, your anxiety, your fear, your grief in healthy ways, so that you do not get stuck in a hole through this process. It can go either way when you're cohabitating with her. It can be a part of your healing, like it was for John and for Tommy, or it can drag you down this horrible downward spiral into depression and despair. And I don't want that for you. And if you have kids, they really need you to be healing, not sinking into pain right now. And that actually takes me to the 5th suggestion I have for you if you're sharing a living space with your soon-to-be ex-wife. And that is to spend quality time with your kids. It's good for you, it's good for them, and your task is going to be as present and emotionally engaged as you possibly can when you're with them. Tommy, the fellow that I told you about who did so much healing work when he was cohabitating with his ex, he recently posted in my Better Be Undivorced community offering advice to a man who's just starting this process of sharing a home with his soon-to-be ex. And one of the pieces of advice he gave was exactly this. He says, one thing that really helped me through was to spend good quality time with my kids. Since most of my situation is past me now, I can see that my time and attention really had a lasting positive impact on them. Not only is it good for you, it's good for them. And if you're a father, I know that you, like many of my clients, are really worried about your kids. You don't think this is the best thing for them. The cohabitating, the tension, the stress between you, you know it's not good for them. I've seen a lot of teenage, young adult children, 18, 19, 20, actually choose to move out while their parents were trying to cohabitate. So you know this is hard for them. You know it's stressful. But you can have an amazing positive impact on them if you are present, emotionally engaged. And what I've seen, what I saw John do, you can actually heal some wounds, some rifts in your relationship with your children while you're going through this difficult cohabitation if you can be emotionally engaged and present. And that's better for them. I see a lot of children coming out of divorce having a better relationship with their fathers than they had before. That's powerful, you guys. It's going to have a huge impact on them going forward, and you can do something about that even as all of this is going on. So I hope that this video gave you just a little bit of hope. I know this is a difficult situation to be in. If you're in it, I'd encourage you to hang out on this channel for a little while. Watch some of the videos about your ex-wife's behavior, understanding why she's doing what she's doing, but really focus on the things that you can do to support yourself. In fact, the next video I would recommend for you is my emotional survival guide for divorced men. It'll help you identify the 9 different major emotional stages I see men going through during divorce, and it gives you specific exercises to work through at each stage so that you can really manage what you're feeling, manage those triggers, get out of that fight or flight response while you're cohabitating. You'll find that video here, and I will see you guys over there in that next video. Thanks for watching.